it is Chris and Karen.
Yes.
Fully branded up this afternoon. There we are, look at that.
Yeah,
We've got the new kit.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, there we go.
I did have a nice yellow jumper on and he asked me to change, so there we are. Slightly triggered there. You're told what to do. Good afternoon. If you are joining us for the first time on this live, I'm Karen, this is Chris. We are we are Fit School, which is really the go-to place in Epping for fitness and health. Jacqueline, hi there. So we really focus on creating programs of exercise rather than just throw anything at you fitness. All very science and evidence based, but also we like to pride ourselves on being quite approachable and open-minded. So we attract those sorts of people. We've got a lovely community in Epping here who have been fantastic over the last year. We've all kept each other going. We're a real support to each other. So proud of them. Yeah. But today we are interviewing, chatting with, it sounds less formal, the lovely Jacqueline. Yes. Jacqueline Hooton, who I'm going to give you a little intro, Jacqueline, before you join us, just to because I feel you'd be less embarrassed if you're not live with us, if I did it that way. So I first met Jacqueline probably about 7 years ago when we went to a fitness event. And at the time, Jacqueline was wearing a very small pair of shorts. And Chris introduced me.
You didn't want to put on the spot.
I'm sure Jacqueline wears small shorts all the time. I'm sure she won't mind me telling about the small shorts. But there were small shorts.
Why bring the shorts into it?
See, look. Because it's a first impression, isn't it? And she looked amazing.
You used to wear small shorts.
Yeah, okay. That's how this all started, really.
Okay, right, go.
Anyway, I digress. So the other significant meeting I had with Jacqueline was a few years later in 2015 when Jacqueline hosted an event called Women in Fitness Empowerment. And I can honestly say that sitting in that room full of women in fitness when my youngest was actually only just one, it was the first time I thought that I might be able to do more than just be a fitness instructor in this industry. It was the first time that somebody made me think, oh, maybe I have a career in this. And things have moved on since then for me, and the way that I suppose, run our business and the way that I teach people, and perhaps just give me a little bit more belief in the fact that there's more to this than the stereotypes of fitness. Oh, right, okay, go on.
You've cut through the chaff. Right, you used to get very hard on yourself. A lot of the noise which is out there in the fitness industry, we all do it as well. But I think what you said to me was the big change. I'm not speaking over you, I'm telling you what
you tell me.
You're not telling people.
I skirt around the edges. Chris doesn't mind telling you how he is. You say it.
There's a lot of chaff out there, and you got annoyed and had several instances with clubs and club managers and studio coordinators, which was hindering you doing what you wanted to do in the first place, which was community-based, help people learn how to apply health and fitness to their lives for the betterment, to get older, to feel better the older you get, and just to improve your health status. That was really what you wanted to do, and all the other stuff was a distraction. And I think you found a group of people who were like-minded. Yeah. And
amazing women.
Yes. Yeah. And that was it.
And Jacqueline, you brought us together, so thank you for that, Jacqueline. And since then, Jacqueline's been an incredible support. I know if I've got a conundrum fitness-wise, I can send Jacqueline a message, and she will be there wherever it is. So fabulous. She is literally, if you want someone in fitness who lifts as she climbs, it is Jacqueline Hooton. Yeah. And so we're so proud of her for getting as far as she did with the Joe Wicks search for a trainer. And just thought it would be amazing to have Jacqueline on with us today to talk all things staying fit as you age, but actually more about training for your age. Sounds really negative. Yeah. It's not. Yeah. It is actually very sensible. It's very sounds dull, doesn't it?
Well, training as you age.
As you age.
Not for your age.
Well, for your age. So that the fact is that you don't... No, but it's not a societal thing. Training scientifically for what your body needs at the age that you are, so that you don't end up broken by the time you're 70 and you don't end up fulfilling those stereotypes.
Yes, well, you've got different things that we need to bring into play here. Now, you've got in athletics, you've got your chronological age, how old you are, and your training age. Now, your training age is how many years you've been training for. So you might have someone who comes to our club and they're 15, but they have a training age of 0 because they have done no training whatsoever. They train differently to the 15-year-olds who have a training age of 5.
Okay.
So similar to, I've got a training age, roughly I've been training 30 odd years, and I'm 43. Some 43-year-olds have got a training age of 0. So it's important to know that it's not just your age. The age is almost the last thing you look at. It isn't the first thing you go to. And the reason why I wanted Jacqueline on here, she is somebody who has just said the same thing all through the time we've known her. So when we listened to one of her interviews with Joe Wicks, a lot of the responses we got were people saying, "This is amazing. We need to hear this message more often. I need to know more about, I need to hear this message more often. Wow, isn't Jacqueline inspiring?" I said, Jacqueline has not changed since I've known her. You've been looking in the wrong places. That's why you haven't heard her message being said before.
Here she is now.
Oh, she's there.
She's there.
I'm here. Sorry, Jacqueline. I was in the middle of the flow.
I snuck her in.
Yeah. So Jacqueline, what was
okay?
Oh, hang on. Can you hear? We can't hear you. Hang on. Say that again, Jacqueline.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's just really loud.
So Jacqueline, what we're saying mid-flow was when we saw you on Joe Witz's Instagram Live, and the stuff that you were saying is things that we just heard you say all the time. And people were saying, "Oh, it's amazing. This is a great message. I've never heard this before, and this is inspiring." I said, "It is inspiring, but she's been saying this since I've known her." And it just points out that there's a lot of fluff still in the industry.
Yeah.
Which obscures salient messages coming through from people who have been doing this for as long as we have and you have as well. And we just wanted to get you on here to talk more about that bit, and then about the joy if you wanted, but more about that bit, because that's the thing that we feel is lacking here. And you mentioned a lot about training as you age. The age is irrelevant. It's training as you age. How can we then move and shift the needle back to that conversation? And also, finally, another question is getting away from training for young people, training for old people. How can we get rid of these kind of...
Yeah, it's just such a nonsense, isn't it? So, I mean, you've touched on different types of ages, but we know we've got, chronological age is literally the day, from the date you were born to wherever you are now. But it's just a really bad indicator of where someone's general health and wellness may be. As we know, we can, for various reasons, people could be quite poorly in their 20s because of underlying conditions, whatever. Likewise, you can have a super fit, well 80-year-old. So we can't really go on chronological age when it comes to exercise prescription. And I think the problem is that we live in such an ageist and ageism society, and it's so insidious, and we don't really realise all the ways that seeps into everything. It's to me, ageism is the last ism that's still not being tackled. So we, most of us would now recognise things that even if previously we didn't recognise them, we would recognise examples of racism now. We would recognise examples of sexism now, but we've still got ageism going on. And to a huge degree, sort of in fitness clubs, with personal trainers, in the whole of society, things like, and I hear this a lot, and that this sounds ungrateful, and I'm not ungrateful, but when people say good for your age, that's ageist, because it does imply there's a standard you either meeting and therefore achieving, or you're below it or above it. And I have a real issue with that, because it sets people up for failure. So if you say someone is good for their age, you're implying there's a whole group of people who are bad for their age. And I don't think that kind of helps promote and engage people. And it sounds like a silly thing, but there's so many examples of that. Things like, referring to someone as a sweet old dear. It's ageist, it's patronising. So sorry, I've gone off on a bit of tangent there. Go for it. And I feel like you really bigged me up in the beginning, so thank you for that. But that was a bit like, oh my gosh.
I know, that's why I thought I won't invite you on until we finish that, because I could just imagine.
We don't want to disappoint people who are listening at the moment, because I'm like, oh my goodness.
And you just saw Ashley, here she is, it's Wonder Woman. But yeah, no, I just didn't want for you to feel uncomfortable, because I know you well enough to know you would have felt really uncomfortable. But it is all true. And it's interesting what you just said about the two things that popped into my head then when you said about the ageism. One is, I know when I've worked on projects to do with encouraging activity, and I get deeply frustrated when, you know, say a news, there's a news item on the television about aging, and they will cut to some really frail looking silver-haired people doing really, like, with a, and I've mentioned it before, with a really patronizing looking personal trainer going, they're there, as if that is all that act. And I hate
it's so stereotypical, isn't it? And if you search for stock online photographs, if you're writing a blog or something, as you'll know, I mean, that's why I have my own images taken, not of me, but like of clients and things, to try and make it realistic. But if you search for stock images of older adults exercising, it's exactly that. It's and I guess, so we've got so many problems around this, because that's kind of the expectation, but that's not the reality. So going back to your kind of original point about where people's fitness levels are and how we're talking to them, you know, we can't go by chronological age. No. We need to look at their functional ability and their biological ability to where they're at, to really get a better understanding, and then use exercise prescription appropriately. Age is not the best thing we can use. We know obviously there are things that can happen and change as people get older. So obviously the body is aging, and there are things we can do to promote healthy aging. Are you all right? Are you looking for?
No, sorry, I'm going to
still hear me
while you're talking.
So we know there are things we can do to promote and support. Likewise, we know, like with a postnatal woman, that there's going to be rehabilitation involved. So we can make some generalizations-ish, but we need to be really careful about saying, like, you know, an over 50s class. Well, you can't just lump everyone over 50 in the same class, or an over 70s class. No. It's really tricky, isn't it? But what I'd like to see is us, get as individuals, that we can be really influential in this and challenge the ideas that are out there, and raise our expectations about what we can do as we're getting older. Because I have so many people come to me and they've kind of accepted their lot in life is it's going to be a downward spiral. And that's obviously can be influenced by your parents, your environment, what you're seeing in the media. So the more we challenge that, the more it's a bit like, you'll know about Roger Bannister, the 4-minute mile, and how that was, it was unknown, wasn't it? But when he ran the 4-minute mile, suddenly you had all these athletes within the next year or two who also ran the 4-minute mile, because the expectation had gone from thinking it was an impossible feat to actually, good God, you can actually run a mile in 4 minutes. And I feel it's a bit like that. We need to kind of raise people's expectations of what is possible, see examples of that out there, and then people can then think, well, actually, I can train, I can do this. I'm no longer thinking that that's my future. But also I know the action that I need to take to promote wellness. Sorry, I've probably gone on way too much.
No, I think that's the challenge, though. I mean, there are two things. One is, I always use Chris's mum as an example, but she doesn't really mention her age, because she gets really quite fed up, which when she goes to appointments, the doctors and the nurses will come and have a gawp, because she looks about 20 years younger than she actually is. But is that not just everyone else looks really rough compared with her? Do you know what I mean? I just think
exactly.
well, that was the point you mentioned earlier, Jacqueline, about this expectation of how you should look and function at a certain age. And I guess the flip argument could be, maybe it isn't necessarily ageism in one sense. It's that they used to have they're conditioned to knowing how people act and function at a certain age. And then they're using ageism as a way to justify how they viewed the world, if that makes sense. Rather than thinking, well, actually, this is the people that I know, but there are people out there who function and act in a different way, who are 78 and 80. Because, I mean, we both train older clients now, and a lot of my male clients, they came to see me because they said they don't want to go the same route their friends have got, which is past 40. They're getting the stereotypical gut, they're drinking a lot in the pubs, and their health is going down the spout, and they look and feel older. and they've said, I don't want to go the same way as my friends. And they're the people who are now my clients, and it's been a long journey. Most of them are 10 years plus, they're 50s and onwards. And it's, I guess the question I'm asking is, how do we then shift it from CrossFit, HIIT, workout boot camps to actually, how are we going to then train the older we get? Which is getting back to the question of the
I think, and the same question from me really is that, you know, how do we, I think it's almost like we have to market exercise and fitness differently. And I've always said this, I get so bored with images and impressions that this is what fitness is all about. If it was, I wouldn't still be doing it.
No.
It's about being active for, you know, for you and for what you enjoy. There isn't a one size fits all. So I suppose how do we have to try and encourage women who, and I do think it tends to be women who've never been sporty, who suddenly think they just have no self-belief that the fitness world is for them. So what do they do?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we kind of need to go back and think what's happened in people's lives and kind of address that as well. So when the way I do it is trying to recognise and talk about the things, the barriers that may have been along the way before for them to engage. So I find many of my clients, for example, did not enjoy school PE. And that early experience, whether it was, I mean, I sound like a Victorian now, but we had outside showers. They were freezing cold. We had to use the showers in all weathers. Well, okay. But the whole humiliating experience being picked for teams or not being picked for teams, and you were either a sporty girl or not a sporty girl. And there's so many women have got the baggage from those years. They just didn't like that. So it may not be that. It may be other experiences. But I think if we recognise what some of the problems have been along the way, we can perhaps talk in a language that's a bit more inclusive. And I have always tried to promote exercise and physical activity from the health perspective, but still recognising that there are people who would like it for the sports and performance and athletic, you know, that for a performance outcome, a functional outcome. There are, you know, when many people, when they come to me when they're younger, they start with the aesthetic one. They, you know, they want to address the aesthetics, and I'm always like, that's fine. I can work with someone who wants to address aesthetics, because, you know, bit by bit, we're going to talk about the health. You know, they're going to get the health benefits along, but I'm not going to say, oh, well, let's not work on aesthetics. It's much more important we work on your health. Whatever brings them to my door, I'm going to work with. But I guess it's really difficult, isn't it? Because we've got, especially sort of with now an industry driven by social media and aesthetics. People respond to aesthetics, don't they? Whether it's a really gorgeous looking cake, a fabulous outfit, beautiful makeup, we are drawn to aesthetics. So that's not going to change, really. I get to my point of view is that we've got everything. That's fine. We've got a range of things. We must not be afraid of speaking loudly about the health point of view and bringing that to people's attention, really, and promoting that, and, you know, and having trainers of all ages, and be talking about it from day one, you know, in terms of health. Not be afraid to talk about that. Because it's all very well saying healthy aging and all the rest of it, but it's not too late to address that at any age, of course. But we'd like people to be aware of their longer term health implications from a younger age. So, for example, you know, eating disorders, you'll be aware, eating disorders, low calorie intake, sort of reducing things like, you know, many people think that they've got allergies and things, but maybe taking out a whole food groups can lead to future issues in terms of osteoporosis, for example, bone density. If you're coming from a place of quite low bone density, you've had very restricted diets, you've had eating disorders, you've had binge drinking, all these other things that are bone robbers, you're going to hit your 50s and menopause and have a major issue. So we do want to be talking about, but it's so difficult, isn't it? Because my son is in training to be a financial advisor, and I think it's a bit like pensions, isn't it? When you're in your 20s, having a pension and being old is years away. It's really hard to think about the future at that point. And I think it's a bit like that with health and fitness. And none of us are really thinking way into the future, and if we knew the future we might be creating by our actions, I think we would make different choices. We would all, of course, make different choices, wouldn't we? The benefit of hindsight. Mm-hmm. And it's how to help people see, and without being doom mongers, it's actually trying to help people see, okay, so the difference between someone who's aging well, if you like, healthy aging, fully functional, engaged in society, living independently, isn't suffering fractures and falls. These are the things that we recognise are helpful. Yeah. And then these are the things that we recognise people may have had an issue with throughout their lifetime, which is why we end up in that, like sarcopenia. Yeah. For anyone watching, that's muscle strength and size, loss of that, and that can lead to frailty in older people. But actually that starts in your 50s. So again, we need to be talking about it earlier. I doubt, without patronising the audience, but I'd be interested to know how many people in the audience, unless they're fitness professionals, actually heard that term, or even aware that sarcopenia is a major concern. And that's happening from your 50s if you're not strength training.
And there's also evidence, sorry to speak over you, that, I know muscle loss in legs can also, it's very much linked with brain atrophy as well. So improving your cognitive function. And this is the challenge, isn't it? I mean, there's so much that we know is beneficial, but what if, and actually Tracy made a point there, because the industry and imagery is so aesthetic led, does that put people off in the first place? What of people who are completely disengaged because they don't fit that model, or they don't see themselves in that person? That there's a whole and also actually because there are many high profile trainers in their 40s and 50s who are talking about this stuff. Again, I suppose it comes down to people just not seeing themselves in the images that they're seeing. Is that why they feel?
But sometimes I think we often felt that we get barriers, maybe as you mentioned earlier, Jacqueline, that people bring so many things into their fitness journey, whether it's experiences at school, PE, things they've been told by the parents, self-esteem, self-confidence, and they often unloading these barriers onto you week after week after month after month. And if the trainer's not skilled enough to be able to distill those and filter those through, that person will have that barrier each time. Because I've had clients in the past where for some reason they just don't want to train with weights, and that's our next topic really. They don't want to train with weights, and it could be about how they feel a woman should look, for example, and we have no idea where that's come from. Maybe it's a bit of the media, it's a bit of what their parents have told them. So how have you got over some people who have said from day one, because we all train with weights, we all see the benefit of weights for health and aesthetics, but mainly health. But how have you coached and tackled people who have maybe come to you from day one and said, I want to get fit, but I'm not training weights?
I think because I've always been an educator in one form or another, I really find it helpful to talk about where they want to be and the things that are going to help them get to that, which then helps them see why we're doing that. And also I try not to frighten the life out of people. So, we start where we're at with people and start with some body weight things, perhaps for some, depending on their, their previous experience and their ability. But my overall experience, particularly as when I worked in gyms, I worked with male clients as well. This is a whole other issue to talk about, sort of the Me Too for personal trainers working by themselves. That's a whole other conversation. But when I then decided from a safety point of view, it was, working out my own place, it was female only. I have invariably seen with everybody I've worked with, the level of confidence just go up. Because there's something about getting stronger as a woman that has an enormous benefit of someone's self-confidence, their self-belief, their self-worth. And that is so powerful, and that's such a privilege to work with people and see the difference that makes to them. So maybe my experience would be different if I was still working in gyms and I was still trying to persuade people. But because people are coming to me, it's a very conscious decision to work with me. and they see the kind of stuff I put out there, and they look on my website and they're very clear about my message, I don't get resistance to it, really. I mean, obviously I'm working with what people want, you know, adapting to what they want and what they're feeling. You know, I've had women who've come to me and they feel they're quite muscular in their legs already. They're conscious about that. They don't want to do anything that might make their legs look more muscular. So that's fine. We're going to work around the other things that they perhaps want to. But I have never had a client, when I'm working one-to-one in my studio, who doesn't love and embrace weights and strength training when they get into it after a few sessions.
That's interesting, isn't it? And it's funny actually what you say, because I get comments from women about, you know, my muscly legs, and I've just learned to, you know, whatever, you know, but you're right, it does. I mean, there's such a lovely feeling of being, you know, being able to carry your own bags or bring your shopping in, or, you know, get a case of wine in, practical things from the front of the house, help your parents out, you know, if someone needs some help with stuff, you know, once your parents are getting more frail. Absolutely. There's so many functional aspects to feeling stronger, aside from the very real benefit that is, it just, you know, when people are moaning about their aches and pains and the hip hurts and the back hurts and the neck hurts, and you just want to scream at them, you need to do your weight training. Like, it makes such a difference. And I think it's when it's that ping moment, isn't it? Oh, that's what I need to do. And it's not, you know, it's not hours and hours.
Tracy,
talking about carrying a heavy handbag, but it's a real thing, Tracy. The suitcases when you go on holiday, you know. One thing, because I know, really interesting chat, and we could talk forever on this, but I'm thinking about kind of making it accessible for people. So, what is the biggest myth, do you think, Jacqueline, about women? So let's say someone who's brand new to training, in their 50s, perhaps has been, you know, busy working, bringing up children, they hit the menopause, symptoms happen, you know, body has a significant change. What's the one thing that somebody, the biggest myth, sorry, around that area of retraining that sort of needs to be dispelled to empower women to feel better and train?
Well, I guess it's never too late. That's the, I mean, I'd really like people to understand it doesn't matter where you're currently at, anything is going to be better than nothing. And although we know, and obviously you know the what would be ideal if we're looking at improving someone's cardiovascular health and their physical strength, we know what would be ideal if we look at the Chief Medical Officer's recommendations. But any step, one step in that direction is good, you know, is a result. And so I think my message would be, it's never too late, but start today. You know, you know, don't think, well, I'll wait until let's start today. It's never too late, but start now.
Yeah, it's like that pension pot, isn't it? As well, I always, you know, I use those analogies all the time. It's like if you needed some help with you know, the right mortgage or the right pension, you'd get help from a financial advisor. You wouldn't assume, you wouldn't just look in, you know, My Money magazine and think, right, I'll have that one, that will work for me. Equally, you wouldn't, you know, well, maybe you would, but otherwise you might bury your head in the sand. If you get so confused, you end up doing nothing. So I always, and I think
that's why, and Chris, but yes, this is why is that having a personal trainer is so valuable, of course. And I guess what I'd really like as well is to, and I guess it's what SimSpa are doing as well. That's the Chartered Institute of Management, Sport and Physical Activity, for anyone who's listening in.
That one that just rolls off the tongue.
Such a long thing, isn't it? But you know, if your trainer's registered with them, you can be fairly sure that they meet the required standards in the industry. And I guess that's why we're looking at chartership now, is to make sure that people are, but if we can raise the profile and people really understand how much training and studying and work personal trainers have been through and how they have to continue to develop that knowledge, then perhaps they would appreciate even more the investing in a personal trainer. You know, I'm not going to let some guy down the road who says he knows a bit about cars tinker under the bonnet of my car. Just call me strange, but I'd like to, you know, my car's really, I don't want it to go wrong halfway down the road. And I think a personal trainer can really save you time, because they can help develop something that's bespoke to you. And then off you go. You can do that. You can check in with them or whatever, but you're not going to make a mistake. You know that the time you're doing it is worth it. You're not faffing around for half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour, never quite sure if you're doing it right or wrong. So I think that's really, really helpful. And hopefully, you know, as we go on and we kind of raise the profile and people really understand what trainers do, I'd like to think that becomes more and more of a thing. It's not, and obviously it's not a cheap thing, but then if you need to see the physiotherapist privately, that's not cheap. If you go and have your hair coloured, hairdressers are open again now, aren't they? So, you know, look, if you compare it to other things, to me, it's like, well, without your health, you have nothing, do you?
No, oh yeah, absolutely. And you, oh, sorry, we were just about to talk at the same time then. I just wanted to, so I've had a client in my head while you were saying that, who actually I see only once or twice a month privately. She comes to my classes, and we always talk about how what we do is really take the, you know, it sounds really complicated, but our job is to do it all for you, not the actual exercise, but to do the research, to know that your program is exactly what you need to be doing, and it progresses in the way that works for you. And you're talking, we can be the experts, we can do the hard stuff for you. So all you need to do is turn up and do the training. But there are ways, I know it does seem like it's you know, a costly exercise, but you know, we have a system where, for example, we can write someone a program, so that we can say, right, this is your program, we'll go through it with you, and they then go away and do that program, and then 2 or 4 weeks later they come back and we update the program. So and you know, you were comparing it with the cost of a hairdresser. Well, actually training in that way is you know, it's probably about the same in terms of cost anyway. But it comes, I suppose then it comes down to value, doesn't it? And valuing the service that someone provides, and your health. Oh, sorry, we're just sticking.
So Bev has just asked a question: can a PT help with carrying out strengthening exercises remotely, or should I be looking for someone local to me?
Good question.
All depends, as Jacqueline mentioned earlier, on your starting point. As long as you get started, an effective program is just one which is slightly trickier than the last one you've done. So I think people often think when they see a program, it must look a certain way. And that's where I get a little bit disheartened when people think of fitness and strength training as it's CrossFit and it's HIIT classes. And they have their point, they're part to play, they're a tool, but we have no idea where somebody is on that journey. And if you go into a gym and see someone who's doing a certain exercise, this is why I hate those gym memes that come out. And we have no idea what that person did last session and what they're doing the next session. They may be on a long program, maybe on a journey, maybe trying to gain strength, maybe gaining confidence, maybe losing weight. We have no idea. So to judge how someone's program looks based on one thing is ridiculous. So I say to Baby, it's just, you can work remotely, always someone locally. Locally is good because you can work on technique. Look at budget, see if you can afford to see someone regularly. If you can't, then think maybe seeing somebody 4 to 6 weeks, have a catch-up session. But most importantly, you need to find someone who knows how to write a program for you. That's the important thing, Bev. And then someone who also works with people.
All my online clients are doing strength training remotely.
Correct.
And they're doing it from, you know, many of them are doing it from never having done it before. So I think you know, if a trainer knows what they're doing, they can do that, whether it's watching someone on a screen or physically in person with them. So yes, it's just the right people. It depends on the person as well, if they'd rather physically go into a gym. But there's you can certainly deliver training sessions effectively online to clients.
Absolutely. So Jacqueline, I've got a question. We talked about as we're getting older, or as we're aging, and your training age is obviously a considerable amount of time, similar to myself. I won't say how many years your training age is, but you've trained differently over the years. So for many people out there who are either PTs or people who are training now, maybe younger than we are, can you explain how your training has changed from someone who's been fairly active and into strength training for some time now, as it was maybe 20 years ago, compared to how you train now?
Yes, well, I guess in a way, my training has kind of evolved, and as the industry has evolved as well, the range of things we could do has changed. I mean, who'd ever heard of CrossFit? Well, CrossFit didn't exist, did it, when I was... No. All the things that didn't exist. You guys are younger than me. We, so many things. We had Jane Fonda videos back in the day. That was.
I still have the workout book, which was my inspiration to start working out. Where my mum, when she was she had 2 or 3 jobs, and part of her job as a midwife, she taught aerobics to the staff there, the nurses and doctors. Right. And the Jane Fonda book, where she's on her back with a leg in the air, that one.
I like the demonstration.
And I used to do that workout at home, and poorly, but still, I used to do that workout at home. So yes, I'm with you with the Jane Fonda book.
Mental image there.
I mean, she's a great example, actually, isn't she? So when I had my first son, I was 26, and so I was working out, after sort of recovery. That was literally it. You used to put the videos on because we didn't have gyms didn't exist like they exist nowadays. There wasn't classes, was nothing really. But of course, she's older than me, and I used to look at this woman in her leotard, looking absolutely amazing, and thinking, she's older than my mother. How can she do that? Yeah. And this is why coming back to that aging thing. It's so important to see role models to make us challenge what we think is possible. So yes, in coming back to how training has changed. So, back then I was working along videos. When my children were little, I just did an awful lot of walking. I had, 2 of them are quite close together. I've got 5 children for anyone watching. And 2 of them, there's only 18 months between them. So I had a double buggy. One was the most enormous baby in the world. One was a tiny little fairy. I got one-sided really strong. I had to keep changing the size of the buggy because one was so heavy. And I used to just fit things around them. I'd do a bit when I could. So I've had to adapt my training. But I guess the real message is, as you get older, is getting really smart about injury prevention and recovery.
Nuggets. It's the nuggets that we brought.
Nuggets.
It's the nuggets.
So what you might have recovered from and bounced back from quite quickly in your 20s perhaps, or early 30s even, may take longer as you get older. Yeah. Or, the implications. So it's always trying to stay the right side of injury, I think. And particularly if you're performing at any kind of level, or you're pushing the boundaries of what you can physically, what you can do, they've always got that fine line, as you know, with athletics, Chris, don't you? There's always that fine line between achievement, performance, and then injury. So I think if you're just looking at overall health and well-being, you're not doing it for an athletic performance, you're not building up to a season or something, it's really important to respond to niggles quickly, rest, train another body part if necessary, seek advice and get it dealt with, but not to... I listened to a really, really interesting webinar recently. We're talking about the heart, how the heart needs time to recover from high intensity exercise as you're older, because it's a muscle like any other muscle. But there'll be no symptoms, there'll be no indications. So whereas you might get sore muscles in your legs and you'll think, okay, well, I can't run today because my legs are really tired. You might not necessarily get that. But if you're doing HIIT session after HIIT session, really high intensity, your heart could be vulnerable because it hasn't had time to recover.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
I know. So go check out Richie Cohen from... I have to put a link. But anyway, so really, really interesting. Because I hadn't really considered that. So there's always, doesn't matter how much we think we know, there's always layers of more stuff. This is why we're constantly updating our knowledge, isn't it, to be aware of that.
Well, it's something Chris talked about only a few weeks ago in our live, how conversely, people who are running think they feel fitter, so run more or run further, but actually what they don't realise is that the tendons haven't quite adapted to the level of training that they're doing. So that's why, rest and a program is so important, and, and tapering up, is that right? Going up slowly. I can't think of the right word.
I mean, the main thing which when we write programs that we schedule in, which are the easiest bit, but the most overlooked section is, as you mentioned, the rest. And whether they've got marathon runners or anyone just training for an event, it's the rest interval. So the HRV, so the heart rate variability, I've done that in the morning, and actually just getting into a pattern of knowing that I hit my peak when I've had a stressful weekend on a Wednesday. So Tuesday, Wednesday is my peak days to train a little harder, and then I relax Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Mm-hmm. And the nugget you mentioned earlier about training smarter is these tools can help us where you are looking at how your heart is functioning, whether it is fully recovered. And I'm listening to my body more now than what I did when I was younger. So when I was younger, I just used to just train, see what happens, and my body can bounce back. The older I've got, I can't get away with it. And now I'm trying to get back into a master's season for athletics. I thought, 6 months I'll be ready. Now it's going to be about 2 to 4 years really, because I had a little niggle in my Achilles, I had a niggle in my collarbone, learning to throw the javelin again, and I didn't allow for the rest days. So I guess in summary, if anyone who's listening to this, that the rest days are so important, more important than you realise. And we all know that you don't get stronger and fitter during the session, it's in your rest days anyway. Yeah. But it's the rest days and listening to your body. But no, I mean, that's good about how you get older, how you train, how you train. Training is different. And any trainers out there who think that they can just train hard and not pay the price later, this is the biggie. I think that they are a bit misguided and not thinking about the bigger picture.
Yeah, and things like investing proper amount of times in the warm up and the mobility and all those other things around. You can still hear me, right?
Yeah. So we're looking at questions.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Questions.
So, I mean,
breast myopia is setting in for me.
Setting up for the session and the warm up, all those things. It's just you definitely, I don't doubt whether you got away with it as a youngster, but you're definitely not going to get away with it as you get older if you try and take those shortcuts. It's going to come back and bite you.
Yeah, well, this is what I always say. Your body gives you more feedback when you get older, and that's the trouble now. It's telling you more, and you have to listen to it. But one thing, I know we've been talking a lot about training and performance and all the rest of it. One thing that I think is really important is that not everyone is competitive, and it's okay to want to just exercise because you enjoy it, or play a sport because you enjoy it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something, and to do with school PE as well, that really, if you weren't going to make the team, you weren't really bothered with, and that's sort of what puts you off. But I think it's really important. Slight side issue. So, I joke about the fact that in tennis, I want a league of nice ladies where we just play nice tennis. We don't really care who wins. And if we forget what the score is, that's okay too. And I think I
couldn't agree more. And those, the mental health benefits, we've talked probably a lot about that in the wider fitness community. And that's kind of really well recognised now. And I think this is an enormous impact for people, really, is to just enjoy being physically active, and the feeling that gives you in the body, and the release that gives you sort of mentally, and not to feel like a victim of things then as well, to feel like a bit empowered, and just to enjoy it. And this is again why I really, particularly because the sort of clients I work with now, so much of that is around, people in their midlife, they've dealt with all kinds of rubbish. I mean, people have had problems with in their relationships. Maybe they're in a second marriage or whatever. They are the sandwich generation. We've got elderly parents in our 50s, but we may still have older children who are adult children but are dependent. So we've got pulled in all directions. So actually having that time for you, just to, as you say, the last thing you actually want is more stress. And now, it's competitive. No. Oh, you're not as good as that. It's really that aspect of it, that just time for you.
Yeah.
Just to think about your own needs, and you just feel better in yourself. The value of that is so, it's hard to put a price on that.
And really that's my focus for my training personally. It's had training so that I don't feel in pain, training to help me sleep and to help me manage, fact that my brain goes a million miles an hour, and training so that I can play tennis okay-ish, enough that I can play tennis, or enough that I can go and enjoy a run and think, isn't this lovely being in the forest, rather than thinking, oh, I'm dying. And that pretty much is the focus of my training.
And that's absolutely fine, isn't it? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's much better people engage at a level that's right for them than feel put off because well, I can't. This is again going back to that, like, one step in the right direction is like brilliant, fantastic. You're going for a short walk each day. Do you know what? I love that. I'm really happy with that. If I I guess this also helps try and change people's perceptions, certainly when they first come to me. But it kind of goes back to that: how can we get it across to people or present it better? And that's, it's just meeting people where they're at. Many people think, oh God, you're going to make me go running, and then you're going to make me
absolutely.
I can't train 4 days a week. And I always say, what do you think you'd like to do? And every time a client says to me, I want to train 5 times a week, I'm going to say, and especially if they've come from nowhere, I'm going to say, I really don't want you to do that. Let's look at your week. How might we fit in half an hour, here and there? And I'd much rather start at the lower end of the spectrum, and people feel good about having fit in a couple of half-hour sessions in the week and coming back begging for more things to do, than say, right, I'm not going to eat this, and I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to train 5 times a week, and then feeling like they've failed because they haven't.
I was going to say, failure is key here. And again, sort of referring back to my lovely friend, she said to me, I'm trying to go for 3 times round the field, Karen, but I get to the end of the second one and I just can't do it. So what do you know what I said to her? Aim for twice.
Yeah.
That's okay,
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's all about, I mean, we talk a lot about shifting the needle, just a little bit, because that's all anyone can ask.
Yes,
so
exactly.
We've got a question from Amanda. Is strength training better than HIIT training in your 50s? Jacqueline mentioned sarcopenia earlier. Do you want to just refresh Amanda with sarcopenia info, Jacqueline, in case Amanda...
So strength, it's not like one is better or worse, to be honest. So, if we're already, let's say, first of all, if you're going to do HIIT training, you need to have a good level of cardiovascular conditioning, first of all.
Yes.
All right, so that's often, and we've seen so much HIIT out there. Everyone goes, oh, I'm going to do HIIT, I'm going to do HIIT.
Yeah.
Please don't do HIIT.
And I'm like,
unless your cardiovascular training is, you're already used to cardiovascular training and you've been doing that for some time, and you can sustain a steady state cardiovascular training for sort of 30 minutes, please don't do HIIT, because your muscles, joints and ligaments, nothing is going to be accustomed to that. Your heart rate, the whole thing is just an accident waiting to happen. Assuming you've got that, then 1 HIIT session a week in with your cardiovascular training is enough. You don't need to be doing it every day.
No.
In fact, there's so many issues, maybe not when you're younger, but certainly as you're getting older, you have to always, in fitness, as you know, you're always looking at the risks versus benefits. Yeah. So you've always got to carefully weigh that up. So coming back to that, but you definitely don't want to not be doing strength training. I'd rather, so cardiovascular health is important. So I'd rather someone was doing steady state cardiovascular training and 2 sessions of strength training a week than they weren't doing any strength training a week at all.
But then there's also the argument that actually, if it's something that you're going to hate and never do, then that's also not going to win.
I couldn't agree more.
It needs to be something you're going to be consistent at.
Yeah, and when I say strength training, so for anyone who's listening to this and then thinking, oh, I just hate weights, it doesn't have to be weights. Even if you're going to stand up from your chair and sit down again without using your arms, and you're going to do that 12 repetitions, that's strength training for your lower body. If you're going to pick up 2 heavy bags of shopping and walk a bit further, not put them in the car, but walk them back from the shops, that will count as strength training. So I mean, I do, obviously, if I work with clients one-to-one, I kind of explain a bit more around that, what I mean. So, but I don't want everyone watching this thinking, oh, I'm never ever going to pick up a weight, I'm not going to do that. Because there's going to be, resistance bands. You don't have to have weights. You could be using resistance bands, you could be using your body weight.
I think just to add on to that as well, just to back up what you've said, is scientists and doctors are scrambling around trying to figure out ways and drugs to give very, very old people to stop and slow down muscle mass and restore muscle mass as well. So we're playing the long game here. I'm thinking, well, what can we do to try to prevent that? And one of the ways is to try to slow down muscle loss as we get older and retain some strength. I put a post up earlier about how to not get slower when you, as we get older. Particularly in our industry, I remember things go round and round and come back again. And it was a while ago, it was all about sprint training, the benefits of sprint training because it increases growth hormone. And I thought, yeah, but as Jacqueline mentioned, you need to be conditioned to sprint at your peak anyway. And most people can't sprint. Most people can't sprint. They think they're sprinting, but they're running quickly. It's a very different mechanism which you're training. So in this article, it talked about how you retain the strength, and it was about, slow and steady. But the key thing was conditioning yourself enough for the thing you're trying to actually train for. Whereas previously, you used to just sprint or run in my 20s and 30s, but now I actually had to condition myself for the things that I enjoy doing. So yeah, it's just backing up what Jacqueline mentioned about muscle loss, and I don't want to pick. There is no good or bad thing in fitness. It's the correct tool. But if we think about what is the main problem as we get older, I would say muscle loss is one. Loss of joint range is two. Balance, coordination, proprioception number three. So those things can be done in the same time in a fun way.
Exactly. And also, so you touched on something else really interesting and relevant, because again, if we've lost muscle mass in our legs as we're getting older, we're not going to be able to achieve the ideal cardiovascular prescription, because we aren't going to be able to just take walking, for example. So if someone is only capable of walking very slowly, they're probably unlikely to be able to hit a cardiovascular heart training zone that would be beneficial. So that doesn't mean that we couldn't. Obviously, we can do things seated, but it means in their day-to-day life, when we think about I was going to say neat, so we don't want to confuse everybody, but if we think about day-to-day movement, if that's all generally slower, it becomes, all the things are impacting each other now. So the heart, the heart isn't being conditioned, and the muscles are being reduced, and the range of movement is being compromised, and we're not challenging balance because we now haven't got the muscles to stand. It's all contributing basically. If everyone watching this could just carry on training, that's it.
Yes.
Have we convinced you?
So don't
stop.
And we have convinced you if you're watching. So can you just all go home and convince everybody in your lives as well? Because we're probably speaking to the converted anyway, aren't we?
But I think there's something in thinking, okay, what is it that I want my activity levels to be like now? What are they, and can I train towards that now? How do I train towards that now? And then also think, how do I want to be in 10, 20 years, and what do I need to do to be that in 20 years? So you're just, as much as that's really all your training needs to be, isn't it? It's not as complicated as we're making it sound. It's just getting advice from people that know what you need to be doing to stay fit and active.
Yes, exactly. And really understanding that if you don't use it, you will lose it. So if you start to feel like, I'm struggling a bit to put things in the cupboard at the moment, okay, there's a big clue that we need to be working on push things. If you're struggling, so quite a few people I've spoken to recently say they've noticed they were struggling sort of getting up and down from the floor. I think because I put a video up about this, and they said, oh God, that really struck a chord with me. So we kind of need to go like, I'm having a problem with that. Why am I having a problem with that? And kind of question that and say, so if I fast forward in my mind, do I want this problem to be getting worse? Wherever your current limitations are, can get worse, can go worse.
And we see it, don't we? I mean, we all have. I know your parents are both supersonic, but we see it in relatives and in older relatives. A niggle one day, and then they get weaker and weaker and slower. Maybe a health condition, surgery, recovering from that, not getting any better. And you see people weight gain. You see people slowing down, and then you think at that point it's going to be really hard for them to actually, as you say.
Yes, of course. So addressing, this is why, like, I never want anyone to think it's ever too late, but also like to do it now, because addressing well, like anything, prevention is always better than cure, isn't it? In all walks of life. So if we can prevent that, if we can do as much as we can to retain good function, to retain muscle mass, to retain cardiovascular conditioning, to retain balance, coordination, range of movement in the joints, if we can do as much as possible to retain that, it's much easier than addressing those things when they're lost or they're diminishing. Right. And
so I get the long term, but then also the short term, as you said and we've said, It's about self-confidence. It's about how it makes you feel now. Because I think people always want a quick win, don't they? And really, the way it makes you feel in yourself, that kind of, oh yeah, I can do this. Or and then the way it makes your head feel, and you sleep so much better.
Yeah.
And there's always that very, you know, this is today. But then we're also thinking about all of those other, you know, the benefits in years to come.
And I'm always about, I try and get people to think about, stop looking for motivation. Motivation shows up and disappears and all the rest of it. But it's what healthy habits can we ingrain? Yeah. And, you know, even if we start off really small with that, you know, can we change what, and also it's not me telling people what they need to do. I'd much rather work with people and find out, you know, the low hanging fruit. What's the thing that they think that they could address, first of all, that feels achievable? Let's do that for a couple of weeks. Come back, let me know. How's that going? Yeah. Okay, could we layer on something else? What else do you think, have you identified in your lifestyle that you could perhaps alter, change, modify that would help you towards this goal? And I think if we can layer in health habits and embed those, we're on a winner, really, and it becomes second nature.
Absolutely.
You mentioned something earlier, and I wanted to come back to Jacqueline. You mentioned earlier about it was the benefits of training, and for some reason in our industry, if people don't feel they've had a workout, they feel
feel the burn.
It hasn't worked at all, or there's been no benefit whatsoever. And I guess the question is, where does that come from? It's alien to me, and we don't feel that way anyway, but we have other feedback mechanisms, which is we feel great rather than we feel like we've overworked. But I just don't get where that comes from and how we can almost try to re-educate people about the fact that, yes, when you work out, you feel you're going to work out, but you don't need to feel on the floor, wiped out, take a picture of yourself with a sweat towel over your face. You know, that's not a sign of achievement. So how do we kind of tackle
I think we just have to, it's really difficult, isn't it? I think we just have to keep banging the drum and address that as professionals in the industry, and also be very careful about the things that we promote and endorse, or balance it with, like, you know, someone's done a really hard training session, but you don't always have to train like that. You know, you might be training for this today. And it's a slow drip feed, hopefully. I just want to warn you, if you haven't done a live for this long before, it will cut out at an hour.
Okay, thanks for that. We should have wrapped up half an hour ago, but it was just really interesting. And,
no, I just thought I'd warn you, because I was looking at the time thinking any minute.
No, thank you. And sorry for keeping you this long, but I was just thinking.
No, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. I don't mind.
I was thinking that one of the things we encourage a lot and talk about a lot is behavioural goals, which are very different to those out there goals. The behavioural goals are just, right, every day today or 3 times this week I am going to. And that comes back to those little healthy habits. And that's so much more achievable than thinking, oh, I'm going to run a marathon by October.
Yes, exactly. Because things like weight loss, that's not a behaviour.
No.
So, you know, if someone says, it's not a behaviour. So we've got to look at the process goals that will get you to that. Yeah. So, yes, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. We ought to wrap up now. And those of you who've asked questions, I'm aware that we haven't been able to cover them all, mainly because we've been doing like this because of our slightly older eyeballs.
Presbyopia.
Yeah.
Can't find my glasses either, which is annoying. I've got reading glasses I can't find.
So, and thank you so much for joining us, Jacqueline. If you have asked some questions, what I'm going to do is actually go through the questions and see whether we can make sure that we answer them over the course of the next few days. So,
and where can we find Jacqueline? Where can we find you? People want to know what you are, what you do.
Her Garden Gym. So they'll find me on my account, Her Garden Gym.
Yeah, and you're based in where?
I'm Bognor Regis.
Sunny Bognor.
With the sun.
I know. And Jacqueline does fabulous beach posts.
Yeah.
Pretty much daily. Still daily?
Yeah, come on to the stories. If you're ever on my stories, you'll see lots of sunrise photos. See, I really do the whole thing. Stress management is really important as well. So I spend a lot of time walking, you know, balance. It's all about balance. So, thank you before it cuts out, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been really lovely chatting to you.
No worries.
And I hope people have found something of value in what we've been discussing. But, it's been so lovely.
And equally, if somebody just popped, what have you done?
I don't know, sorry. Go on.
On the take. I will share this to our page so that we've got it to share. But what I also do, although it's an hour, so I'm not sure how this will work, but I do try and upload it to YouTube as well, so that we've got it for anyone that's not on Instagram, although everyone here obviously is. But thank you so much for joining us, Jacqueline.
Yeah. You're very welcome. Thank you for asking me. I've really enjoyed it. I could talk all day, but
we didn't talk
we had
Joe,
all these
we didn't
topics
talk
that we didn't get through, so
go see Jacqueline's page.
Thank you. Bye everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.